There's something comforting about routines. Sunday mornings were always the same. She'd go to yoga, I'd make breakfast, maybe start a new episode of something, and the house would stay quiet except for the occasional hiss of eggs in the pan or the soft hum of our ceiling fan. It was the kind of simplicity you don't question. You just live in it. That morning felt no different. She kissed me on the cheek, tied her hair back into a neat ponytail, and grabbed her mat and water bottle. "I'll be back in a couple hours," she said, smiling. "Have a good session," I replied, flipping pancakes like nothing was broken. She didn't even flinch. I finished making breakfast, set aside her plate like I always did, some part of me clinging to the habit even when she wasn't home to enjoy it. I sat down on the couch, coffee in one hand, remote in the other, and turned on the TV. That's when it happened. A notification popped up on the screen. Sierra's AirPods Pro connected. I blinked. The TV and her AirPods were linked under the same Apple ID. We never used it for anything except the occasional screen share. But the connection shouldn't have happened. Not unless her AirPods were in range. And she was supposed to be at yoga. I stared at the screen. Then, audio. At first it was muffled. Just shuffling and movement. Then the unmistakable sound of her voice, breathless. Laughing. And a man's voice. Not mine. His voice was lower, cockier, laced with the kind of familiarity you don't build in a single session. I muted the TV immediately and sat there frozen. Was it a mistake? Was I mishearing? But then came the words that removed all doubt. "You said 10 minutes. Guess I'm just that good." Her laugh followed. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. My hand gripped the coffee mug so tight the heat bit through my skin, but I barely felt it. She wasn't at yoga. She was with someone. And her AirPods had synced to the last place she expected, to the man sitting at home, making breakfast for a woman who was never going to eat it. I didn't move. Not right away. The words still hung in the air, even after I muted the sound. Her laugh. His voice. That awful, smug confidence in what he said, like it wasn't the first time. Like it was a routine of their own. I reached for the remote, hands cold despite the heat still radiating from my coffee. I unmuted the TV just enough to hear the last few seconds of the synced audio. Rustling. A zipper. Her voice again, low and close. "Don't leave that mark. He'll ask questions." Then silence. The AirPods disconnected. Just like that. My heart didn't race. My blood didn't boil. No, it was worse than that. I felt still. The kind of stillness people talk about after a car crash. That eerie quiet where your body hasn't caught up to the fact that something terrible just happened. I stared at the black TV screen, then slowly stood, walked into the kitchen, and rinsed her plate. The one I'd set aside just 15 minutes earlier. The one I used to prepare without thinking. Now every movement felt like I was acting in someone else's skin. It's funny what your brain does in moments like that. I didn't scream. I didn't punch a wall. I opened her laptop. It was still logged in. She never changed her passwords. We never had to. Or maybe she just thought I was too trusting to look. And until now, she'd been right. I checked the Find My app. It took 5 seconds. She wasn't at the yoga studio. Wasn't even in the neighborhood. She was 2 blocks away, on Parkside Avenue. A hotel. Not a nice one. One of those, no questions asked, kinds. One of those places where the rooms are all the same and nobody remembers your name. I sat back in the chair and stared at the screen. Her little icon blinked right there on the map. I zoomed in. Room 114. I stared at it until the number carved itself into my skull. I had 2 options in that moment. I could blow up her phone, accuse her, scream into the void. Or, I could do what she never saw coming. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, left the untouched breakfast on the counter. And I drove. No plan. Just instinct. The hotel was even sleazier in person. Cigarette butts lining the sidewalk. The kind of curtains that never get opened. I parked across the street and sat there for a moment, engine ticking. And then, like fate had something to prove, the door to room 114 opened. She stepped out first. Hair a mess. Hoodie zipped halfway. Eyes scanning like she was afraid someone might see her. Then came him. Some guy I'd never seen before. Tall. Too confident. He slapped her playfully on the backside and kissed her neck. She giggled. Just like that. The same laugh she used with me on our honeymoon. In the kitchen. On lazy Sundays when we danced barefoot with no music. And now it belonged to him. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't cause a scene. I took a photo. Her. Him. Together. In broad daylight. Clear as a confession. Then I drove away. Back home. Back to the place I'd just cleaned her dish, set her spot, believed her lie. And when I walked inside, the house felt unfamiliar. Like I was standing in a replica of my life built by someone else's hands. I sat on the couch, turned the TV back on. Nothing good was playing. Static voices, overloud laughter from some sitcom where everything always works out in 22 minutes. And I waited, not because I didn't know what I had to do, but because I wanted her to walk through that door, and lie to my face one more time. The clock ticked past noon before I heard her key in the lock. The sound felt loud somehow, like it split the room open. I didn't turn my head. I stayed exactly where I was, sitting on the couch, TV still playing a rerun of a show neither of us really liked. The door creaked open. She stepped inside, wiping her feet automatically on the mat like she always did. I heard the familiar shuffle of her bag dropping onto the table, her keys clinking into the bowl by the door. "Hey babe," she called lightly, voice full of fake sunshine. Yoga was packed. "I'm starving. What's for lunch?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer, probably thinking I hadn't heard her. I finally turned my head, slow, deliberate, and met her eyes. She froze. People talk about guilty looks, but unless you've seen someone realize they've been caught red-handed, you don't really understand the art of it. The way their pupils dart, the way their hands fidget with nothing, the way their body leans ever so slightly, like they're fighting the urge to run. "Something wrong?" she asked, voice a little too bright, too careful. I held up my phone, the screen facing her. The photo. Her and her new friend, tangled in broad daylight outside that hotel. I didn't say a word. She stared at it, blinked, swallowed hard. Then, like a reflex, she laughed. Not a real laugh. A brittle, broken sound, like maybe if she laughed first, it wouldn't be so serious. "That's not what it looks like," she said, stepping forward. I raised an eyebrow. "Silent." She faltered. "Okay, it's not great," she rushed out. "But it's complicated. You've been so distant lately, and No," I cut her off, voice quiet, firm. "Don't spin this." She opened her mouth again, probably to toss another lie into the air between us, but I shook my head. "You weren't at yoga," I said, slow and measured, each word like a stone dropping into water. "You were at the Parkside Motel, room 114, with him. Your AirPods told me everything before you even stepped out that door." Her mouth opened, closed, speechless. Finally, the silence stretched. The TV laughed on behind us, oblivious, cruel. I stood up, walking past her toward the bedroom. She followed me, barefoot, almost stumbling. "Wait, can't we talk about this? You're jumping to conclusions without hearing me out." I grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed earlier. Just the essentials. Nothing more. When I turned to face her, she reached for me. I stepped back. She froze, hand dangling midair. "Talk," I said, voice tight with something dangerously close to pity. "You want to talk now?" She nodded, desperate. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I slung the bag over my shoulder and headed for the door. "You had every chance to talk before you slipped into his bed," I said over my shoulder. "You chose silence then. You don't get a conversation now." Her voice cracked. "Please, David. It didn't mean anything." I turned at the door, looked her dead in the eye. "If it didn't mean anything," I said, voice steel, "then why did it sound so easy?" She crumbled then, right there in the doorway. Tears spilling, voice hitching in her throat. I didn't stay to comfort her. Because those tears weren't for me. They were for herself. For the life she torched without thinking. I walked out without slamming the door, without a second glance. Because there's a kind of goodbye that doesn't need to echo. It just needs to end. Outside, the air was crisp and clear. I stood there for a moment, breathing in a life that, for the first time in a long time, felt like it might just belong to me again. Then I walked to my truck, tossed the bag onto the passenger seat, and drove off into a world that didn't wear her fingerprints anymore. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel lost. I felt found. I didn't have a real destination when I pulled out of the driveway. I just needed distance, between me and her, between me and the lies that had piled up so high I couldn't see over them anymore. I ended up at Nate's. It's funny how, when everything else crumbles, there's always that one person who keeps their door unlocked for you. No questions. No conditions. He answered on the second knock, standing there in sweatpants and a hoodie, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed even though it was almost noon. "Took you long enough," he said, stepping aside. I dropped the bag just inside the door and collapsed onto the couch. Nate disappeared into the kitchen and came back a minute later with 2 beers. No words yet. Just the kind of silence that says, "I'm here. Say it when you're ready." I cracked the beer open and stared at the wall for a long moment before I finally spoke. She wasn't at yoga. Nate didn't say anything, just sipped his drink. She was with someone, I continued, at some cheap motel. Still no comment from him, just a slow, steady nod, like he wasn't surprised, like he'd been waiting for me to catch up to something he already sensed. Her AirPods connected to the TV, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. If that hadn't happened, I would have been making her lunch, waiting for her to come back and tell me all about her warrior pose. I laughed then. It wasn't a happy sound, more like something cracked open inside me and all that came out was bitterness. Nate finally leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You don't have to explain it to me, man. She made her choice. And you made yours when you walked out that door. I nodded, took another swig of the beer, let the silence fall between us again. Where are you staying? He asked after a while. I shrugged, hadn't thought that far ahead. He tossed his keys onto the coffee table. Stay here. Spare room's yours for as long as you need it. I didn't argue. Couldn't. Because for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't trying to figure out how to fix things. I was just trying to be. The rest of that day blurred into something soft and quiet. We ordered pizza. Watched a game we didn't really care about. Nate cracked stupid jokes. I laughed harder than I should have at them. It felt good to laugh, even if it was temporary. Even if I knew the real work, the real ache, was still waiting for me once the adrenaline wore off. Later that night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in Nate's guest room, I pulled out my journal. The same one Claire had convinced me to start months ago when things were still fine. I opened to a clean page. The words came fast, without force. You don't lose someone the day they leave. You lose them the day they stop choosing you. And sometimes, the universe is merciful enough to let their lies trip over their own arrogance. I set the pen down and stared at the ceiling, thought about how many times I ignored the little things. The sudden need for more space. The new passwords on her phone. The way she pulled away just slightly when I kissed her goodbye. I had wanted so badly to believe we were solid, untouchable. Turns out we were just quiet in our collapse. And now I had a choice. I could let this define me, or I could let it free me. As I closed the journal and turned off the light, I made a promise to myself. I would heal, not to prove anything to her, not to make anyone regret leaving, but for me, because I was tired of loving people who didn't know how to stay. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the cracked blinds like it was trying to wake me up from a nightmare. But there was no waking up. This was it. Reality. No dreams to blame, no misunderstandings to cling to. I laid there for a while, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of it settle. Not crushing, not drowning, just there. Nate had already left for work by the time I dragged myself into the kitchen. He left a note on the fridge, scrawled in that terrible handwriting he always joked about. Help yourself. Stay as long as you need. N. Next to it, a box of cereal and a gallon of milk sat waiting. It was stupid, but I smiled. Sometimes it's the small things that remind you life isn't completely terrible. Sometimes it's just a friend who knows you well enough to stock up on the cereal you liked back in college. I ate standing up, leaning against the counter, scrolling through my phone. There were texts from Ava. Of course there were. First a few casual ones. Can we talk? Then angrier. You're being immature. Finally desperate. I miss you. Please come home. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just emptiness. I didn't answer. I wouldn't. Let her sit in the silence she created. I cleared the notifications and threw my phone face down on the counter. Later that day, I met Claire for coffee. I hadn't planned it. She just texted me, coffee, and somehow, it was the easiest yes I'd said in weeks. When I walked into her bookstore, she was already waiting with 2 cups, holding one out without a word. She didn't ask what happened, didn't press. She just slid the coffee toward me and said, "You look lighter." I chuckled, shaking my head, not sure that's the word I'd use. We sat by the window, the city moving outside around us like a life I wasn't part of yet, still watching from the edges. After a while, I finally spoke. She cheated. Claire didn't gasp, didn't widen her eyes or cover her mouth like people do when they want you to perform your pain for them. She just nodded, like she already knew. Maybe not the details, but the weight of it. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "Yeah, me too." She sipped her coffee. "You thinking about what's next?" I shrugged. "Right now, I'm just trying to remember who I was before all of this." Claire smiled. "He's still in there. Probably pissed off and stubborn as hell. But he's there. For the first time in days, I laughed. A real laugh. Short, but real. She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. "Here," she said, sliding it across the table. I raised an eyebrow. "Another journal?" "No," she said. "Something different." I unwrapped it carefully. It was a small, leather keychain. Simple, clean, stamped with 2 words. "Still standing." I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't flashy, wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And right now, real was exactly what I needed. "Thanks," I said quietly. "Anytime," Claire replied. "Just remember, you survived the worst part. The part where you found out." She leaned in a little closer. "Now you get to survive for yourself." I left the bookstore feeling different. Not fixed, not whole, but possible. That night, back at Nate's, I pulled out my journal, opened to a new page, and wrote. "The hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's realizing you let someone see you. Every flaw, every hope, every dream. And they still chose to hurt you. But here's the thing. Their choice doesn't rewrite who you are. Only yours does." I set the journal down and leaned back. Tomorrow would come, and I wouldn't meet it from the floor. I'd meet it on my feet, still standing, and stronger than she ever deserved to see. By the end of that week, the fog had started to lift. Not completely, but just enough to see the outlines of the damage. And maybe, more importantly, the edges of the road ahead. Ava hadn't let up. The texts kept coming, though less frequent now. Shorter, less poetic, more desperate. "We should talk. I made a mistake. Can we at least have dinner? Don't throw us away." I didn't respond to a single one. It wasn't about punishment. It was about preservation. Because I'd learned something valuable in the silence. When someone betrays you, they don't get to dictate the healing. They don't get to set the terms of repair when they were the ones who set fire to the foundation. On Saturday morning, I found myself back at the apartment. Nate was still asleep. I had the spare key. I hadn't told her I was coming, didn't need the drama. I wasn't there to talk. I was there to collect the last pieces of myself from a place that no longer felt like home. I stood in the doorway for a minute after unlocking it. Just stood there, looking in. Everything was exactly as I left it. The blanket tossed over the couch. My shoes by the door. Her favorite candle burned low on the kitchen counter. A mockery of comfort. And the air was thick with the ghost of something that used to be real. I walked through the rooms quietly. My drawer in the bedroom. My side of the closet. I packed it all, methodical, calm. No rush. No hesitation. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because I deserved to finish this with the same care I used to give to us. I found one of her hair ties in the bathroom. The blue one with the silver thread. I didn't throw it. Didn't keep it. I dropped it in the trash and moved on. In the living room, I saw our wedding photo still sitting on the shelf. I picked it up. Looked at my own face. That guy had no idea. No idea what was coming. No clue that the woman beside him would one day kiss someone else and then come home and say, "I love you," like it was still sacred. I put the photo down, face down. It didn't belong anymore. Just as I zipped up the final duffel, I heard the front door unlock. She walked in. We locked eyes. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoulders slouched like someone who hadn't slept much. She looked like guilt, like regret. She looked too late. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said, voice brittle. "I'm leaving the key," I replied simply. Her eyes dropped to the bags by the door. "So that's it?" I nodded. She took a step forward. "Can we at least talk?" "We've already said everything," I said. "Just not out loud." She blinked, tears forming fast. "David, don't," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "You had your chance. You chose him. Over and over. You chose to lie. You chose to protect a secret instead of protecting me." Her bottom lip trembled. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was so pathetically predictable. "You didn't mean to get caught," I said. "There's a difference." Silence. Then she asked the question all cheaters eventually do. "Is there someone else?" I paused. Not because there was. But because I realized there didn't need to be. "There's me," I said. "And that's finally enough." I walked past her. Didn't touch her. Didn't flinch when she whispered my name. Outside, the air hit my skin like a reset. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. I just breathed. At Nate's, I unpacked only what I needed. The rest could wait. Later that night, I opened my journal. And wrote. "The hardest goodbye isn't to the person. It's to the version of you that still held on to them. But when you let that go, what's left isn't broken. It's yours. And that version of me, He was just getting started. Sunday came like a quiet warning. The streets were still. Even the wind felt slower, more hesitant, like the world knew I needed just one more day without disruption. I woke up early, before Nate, before the city, and went for a walk. There's something about early mornings, before anyone's had the chance to lie to you, that makes things feel clean, honest. I grabbed a coffee and ended up at the park near the bookstore. Sat on the same bench Claire and I had once shared during a late fall afternoon when the leaves were just starting to die but still looked beautiful doing it. She texted while I was sitting there. "Claire, you alive?" "Me, barely." Park bench. Same spot. She showed up 20 minutes later. Scarf around her neck, a second coffee in hand. No makeup. No words for the first few minutes. We just sat. Then she said it. "You finally went back, didn't you?" I nodded. Took my things. Told her it was over. Claire didn't smile. Didn't say good job or I'm proud of you. She just said, that had to hurt. And God, it did. Even after everything. Even after the motel, the lies, the fake smiles. It still burned in a quiet, aching way, like cutting off your own arm just to escape a trap. She asked if there was someone else, I said after a while. Claire raised an eyebrow. "And what did you say?" "That there was me, finally." She smiled at that. Not a big one, just enough to let me know I wasn't crazy for saying it. "I think we forget that we matter alone," I added. "That we're worth saving, even when someone else gives up." She nodded. "The bravest thing you've done is not call her back." We sat in silence again, letting the breeze cut through the last bits of winter. "Do you still love her?" Claire asked. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes I miss the idea of her, I admitted. But I don't miss the real version. The one that looked me in the eyes and lied. Claire looked over at me for a long moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Something to mark the end," she said. "And maybe the beginning." Inside was a new pen. Heavy, brass body. Engraved along the side were 3 words. "Write the truth." I turned it in my hand, felt the weight of it. "You know me too well," I said. She smiled. "That's the point." We parted ways not long after. She had to open the shop. I had things to think about. Not fix. Just consider. Back at Nate's, I packed my things for real this time. Told him I'd be finding a place of my own soon. He gave me a long hug, patted my back like brothers do when they don't have the right words but mean every ounce of the silence between them. I spent that evening looking at apartments. Studios. 1-bedroom walk-ups. Nothing fancy. Just space that belonged to no one but me. That night, I opened the journal again, now nearly full, and wrote with the new pen. She said she wanted space. So I gave her all of it. No more explanations. No more waiting to be chosen. I am not the leftover. I am the beginning. The words hit harder when they came from ink instead of screens. I stared at the page for a long time, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't want her back, not even a little. What I wanted, what I finally had, was a version of myself who didn't chase ghosts. And that was worth everything she threw away. It took me 3 more days to sign the lease. It wasn't that I was afraid. I'd already crossed every line that marked the end of us. But there's something about writing your name on a contract, your name alone, that makes it real. That says, this space, this silence, this starting over, belongs to you. The apartment wasn't much. Top floor, corner unit. The kind with old hardwood floors that creak just enough to remind you you're not standing on anyone else's ground. Big windows, no furniture yet. A kitchen too small for guests, but perfect for one. I stood there in the center of it all with the keys still in my hand and felt something I hadn't in weeks. Pride, not because I escaped, but because I chose to. Nate came by that night with pizza and a tool kit. We put together a table I'd ordered online and 2 chairs that didn't match. He tossed me a beer when we finished and said, "Place feels like you." Unfinished? I joked. He grinned. "No, clean." We sat there, eating off paper plates, laughing at how one of the chairs wobbled and how neither of us knew how to fix it. Eventually, Nate leaned back and said, "So, what now?" I shrugged. "I don't know. Start over, I guess. Not with someone. Just, with me." He nodded. "That's probably the best thing you've said all year." And he wasn't wrong. Later, after he left, I stood in front of the window with the city stretched out beneath me. Headlights moved like thoughts. Slow, steady, untouchable. I pulled out the journal again, the one I thought would be full of pain and regret. But now, page after page, it looked more like a map of someone finding his way back. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, They always talk about the moment they get caught. But the real moment, the one that breaks you, is when you realize you were the only one, fighting for something they already left. The next morning, I opened the front door to find a package on the floor. No label, just my name in careful handwriting. Inside was a book, a poetry collection, and a note, folded neatly inside the front cover. Claire, not because you need inspiration, but because you've become mine. Keep writing, keep breathing. The good ones stay. I stared at the words longer than I meant to, because I wasn't used to someone giving without asking, wasn't used to love that didn't come with apologies attached. That afternoon, I visited her at the shop. She was restocking shelves, humming some song under her breath. When she saw me, she smiled, but not the kind that demanded anything, just the kind that said, "I see you." "I got the book," I said, holding it up. She raised an eyebrow. "Any favorites yet?" "I haven't read a word," I said. The note hit harder than anything inside could. Her cheeks flushed just slightly, then she looked down. "I didn't write it for impact." "I know," I said. "That's why it landed." We stood there, no awkwardness, no expectations. Just a quiet current between two people who'd learned what it meant to be dropped and still choose to rise. I helped her finish shelving the books, and when I left, I didn't ask her to dinner. Didn't ask for anything. Some things deserve to move slow. Some connections need silence before sound. Back at my new apartment, I unpacked the final box, books, journals, pieces of who I used to be. And then I found a photo. Ava and me, from better days. Smiling on a rooftop in the city. A moment that felt real at the time. I stared at it for a beat, then quietly slid it into the trash. Not out of anger, out of release. Because some chapters don't need to be rewritten, they just need to close. March came in cold. That stubborn kind of cold that clings to your sleeves and reminds you winter doesn't leave just because the calendar says so. But I didn't mind. Something about that lingering chill matched the way I felt, awake, bracing, but finally honest. The apartment started to look more like home. Books on the shelf, a coffee mug I actually liked, new bed sheets in a color I picked, not because someone else said they were modern, but because I liked the way they reminded me of clear skies. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then curiosity got the better of me. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I'd like to meet. Just once. You deserve the truth." It was signed, Mark, the guy from the hotel. The one she chose when she lied to me with yoga and soft kisses goodbye. I sat with it for hours. Thought about what seeing him would do. Thought about what not seeing him would leave behind. Then I texted back. "One drink, public place. You talk, I listen, then it's done." We met the next evening at a quiet bar on 12th, low lighting, too many whiskey bottles, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't been updated in a decade. I picked a booth in the back. He walked in wearing a button-up too clean, a face too nervous. He spotted me and approached slow, cautious. "David?" he asked, like I might change my mind at the last second and walk away. "Sit," I said. He did. We ordered drinks. Silence stretched until he finally cleared his throat. "I didn't know," he said. "Not at first." I didn't respond. "She told me she was married," he continued, "but said it was complicated. That things were basically over." I gave him a hard look. "Does complicated usually include sleeping in the same bed and making Sunday morning pancakes?" He winced. "I didn't ask enough questions." "That's on me." "Damn right it is." He nodded. "It got serious fast. Too fast. I didn't know she was still with you until she slipped one night. Said your name in a way that didn't sound like someone who'd moved on." I sat back, arms crossed. "So why are you here?" He swallowed hard. "Because I walked away too," he said. "The second I realized what she was doing. I blocked her number. Changed gyms. The works. You think that makes you noble?" I asked. "No," he said quietly. "Just human." The silence between us changed then, hardened. "Look, I didn't come here to beg," he said. "I just thought, maybe hearing it from someone else would help you close the chapter." It didn't. Not really. But I appreciated that he tried. I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table, looked him in the eye. "Next time," I said, "ask more questions before you build a life with someone else's bricks." And then I left. Back in the apartment, the city lights spilled through the windows like old memories. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out the journal, and wrote. He said he didn't know. And maybe he didn't. But neither did I. Until the universe synced 2 AirPods. And let the truth bleed through. Sometimes. Betrayal doesn't whisper. It broadcasts. I closed the journal and looked around. No one here but me. No lies in the air. No noise behind closed doors. Just one man, a brass pen, and the sharp edges of healing. And as strange as it sounds, I was starting to like the silence. Because now, it belonged to me. It rained the day I finally said goodbye for Real. The kind of steady, whispering rain that doesn't demand attention, but refuses to be ignored. I stepped out of the apartment with my hood up, journal tucked under my arm, and a quiet weight in my chest that felt more like peace than pain. Claire had invited me to a small reading event at her bookstore. Nothing fancy. Just a handful of people sharing their words, their scars, their steps forward. She called it, the Still Standing Sessions. Said the name came from a line I once wrote. I didn't know whether to laugh or be honored, so I did a little of both. When I arrived, the place was dimly lit, the shelves rearranged to form a soft circle of folding chairs. A few faces I recognized. Most I didn't. Everyone holding notebooks or folded pages or hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Claire smiled when she saw me. No pressure in her eyes. Just the kind of warmth that doesn't ask for anything in return. You okay? She asked softly. I think so, I said. Or at least, better. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a familiar object. The keychain she'd given me. Still standing. You left this the other night. I took it back, fingers curling around the metal like it was a promise. Thought you might need it tonight, she added. I nodded and sat down. The reading started. One by one, people shared their broken pieces, their stitched-up hopes, their slow, shaking victories. And then Claire looked at me. You want to share something? I hesitated, looked down at the journal in my lap, then opened it. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I read. You said you were going to yoga. You said you needed space. You said we were fine. But lies don't need fireworks. Sometimes they come through wireless headphones. And sound like someone else's breath, on your wife's skin. But here's what you didn't count on. I would listen. And I would leave. And I would still stand. Silence followed. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just real. I closed the journal. Looked up. Claire's eyes were glassy, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to hand that weight back to the universe. After the event, she walked with me to the door. You sure you're done writing about her? She asked. I think I'm ready to write without her, I said. She smiled. Then I think your real story's about to start. The rain had stopped. The city glistened like it had been washed clean. We stood there for a second longer. Then I turned to go, journal under my arm, the old pain behind me. No more Ava. No more excuses. No more pretending that betrayal needs closure when it really just needs truth. And the truth was simple. She lied. She left. And I'm still here. Still breathing. Still building. Still standing.